All right. Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Michelle Dang with the Wishwell podcast. I'm here today with Dr. Ingrid Yang. And she and I talked a little bit before we started recording. And I just want to share with you all that I actually had followed her for years and years when Instagram almost first came out on my personal Instagram page. And then we connected on Facebook on one of the Facebook groups. And I was like, is this the same Ingrid Yang? And of course it is. And a little bit about her. And I definitely want her to share her story with you all. She was first a yoga teacher, owned her own yoga studio, and then she was an attorney and then got into the field of medicine. So now she is a board certified physician hospitalist in San Diego, California, with a lot of exciting things coming up in the field of yoga. So welcome, Ingrid. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Michelle.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit. I know we chatted a little bit beforehand, but before we get into yoga, tell us about your journey.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, I started when I was a teenager. I just started college, and in college, you're kind of free of all of the conceptions you had of yourself in high school, right? So you're like, this is a new start. And I made a lot of great friends, but one of my friends was like, Ingrid, you're a lot. Like you got a lot going on up here in your head and a lot of energy. Have you tried and considered yoga? And I was like, no, because I'm a runner and that's how I get my catharsis. And I need to do like hardcore alpha kind of type A exercising. And so yoga doesn't seem like it's cool. And, and so she brought me to a yoga class, which I thought actually was okay. But I, again, only considered it as like an adjunct to all of like the hardcore sports, competitive sports that, I was more appropriate for a really type A freshman in college. Right. And then I tried another yoga class during my freshman year, Christmas break, and I hated it. It was at a gym, and the teacher was calling out all these Sanskrit words, and people were breathing really hard, and it just like felt weird. It was just weird. It was uncomfortable for me. And then again during like the spring break of my freshman year, I went to a class in New York City, and this was like at a proper yoga studio, and I remember being in triangle pose and being advised to just breathe into my ribs and breathe into the moment. And it was like lightning struck. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I love this. And it was really the concept that the teacher really drove home in that posture and in that class, was that like, be in the present moment. Like you don't need to be anywhere else than you are right now. You don't need to be anyone else than you are in this moment. You don't have to strive to achieve anything. You don't have to prove anything. You can just be exactly as you are, and you're perfect and whole just like that. And that was a completely new concept for me. Now it's, over 20 years later, I'm like, wow, that's such a core part of who I am now,
Mm-hmm.
but was so foreign to me at the time. So my journey in yoga really has been a journey of self-discovery and the attainment of resilience and maturity, emotional maturity mostly. Um, and then, I started pretty soon after I started practicing yoga quite a bit. When you love something, you just want to share it. So I started teaching at like the local gym, or like the college gym. And I still remember like, I think I was like turning almost, I was at the end of my sophomore year, almost a junior. And they're like, hey, do you want to teach these classes over the summertime? We'll pay you $30 per class. And I was like, whoa, that's so
Wow.
much money.
As a college student, right?
Yeah. And I was just so excited. And it really turned into something that was more of a gift to me than my students. And honestly, at the time, I didn't even have a certification. I was just flexible, and I'd practiced a lot of yoga, and I had some books. So I kind of knew how to put together a class, but I didn't get my certification until a couple of years later. But then also when I went to law school, I started teaching a lot then. And I went to law school at Duke. So it was in Durham, North Carolina, which wasn't quite as advanced in the yoga community as maybe New York City was. And so I just taught at the gym, and there was no yoga studios in town. And I still remember so law school 3 years, during my first year, L1 year, I maybe had like 10 or 15 people in class. And then by the end of my third year, there was like 70 people in class.
Wow.
And
That's a huge class.
it was huge. Yeah. And it was the kind of thing where people had been going for, every week for 3 years. And then it just built and built and built. And I remember people asking, well, okay, so you're graduating from law school, you're going to go to New York and be a corporate lawyer. And then who's going to teach us yoga? Like, how are we going to get yoga? And this was 2005. So, there was no such thing as like online yoga at the time, right?
Even at that time, yoga was not that huge of a deal as it is now.
It wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't very popular. And I honestly, I didn't have an answer for them. I was like, I'm go be at peace, people. I didn't have anything to say. So, I went to New York City and I practiced law, and it was fine. But being in law school was much more fitting for my disposition, right? I'm very much an idealist, and I believe in advocacy and helping others and serving others. And I tried a lot of different practices and departments in law, but I really never found one that resonated with me because I didn't feel like I was really helping people enough. And even then, I was doing a lot of pro bono work for my corporate law firm. I still just didn't feel like, because especially like when I was a lot of immigration law that I was doing, and it takes like years. So I wasn't seeing the kind of like feedback that I felt like I needed in order to in the manner that I wanted to help people. So after a year of practicing corporate law, I was still kind of living like a college student because I didn't know any other way to live. I was like not spending any money. I was living with 2 roommates in New York City, in the Upper West Side. And so I was making a lot of money, but I was not spending a lot of money. So I had like something like $90,000 saved up from that year. And I was obviously paying off, I paid off a lot of loans from like a company I started in college. So I had some loans, but not a lot. So I just took that little nest egg and I moved to North Carolina, back to Duke, like literally opened a yoga center across the street from Duke University.
And so at this point, you'd been gone a year? You'd been gone a year and then you came back? Was everybody like super excited to have you back, open up a studio?
Everyone was super excited to have me back, yeah. And I was just, we were immediately in the black because I'd already built up a following there. And I mean, there wasn't really any other yoga studio in town, so we were the only game in town as well. So it was, and the community built so quickly and in such a beautiful way. I still remember like when we had our soft opening, I had a woman came in and with her friend, and they were both pregnant. And they said, "Do you offer prenatal yoga classes?" And I was like, "Nope, but that's a good idea. I'm going to put it on the schedule for next week." And now her child is 13. It's crazy, like how the community, I feel like that was built around that place, and it felt very meaningful to me at the time. Yeah, and it still does.
Awesome. So now tell us about your shift into medicine.
Yep. So I always knew I wanted to be a doctor. My father's a physician, and he's an OBGYN, still solo practice, which you have to admire.
Wow.
That. He's still like, he's going to hate me for telling his age, but he's like 71, and he's still getting up at like 3 a.m. and delivering twins. He's amazing. And he's always been so dedicated. And so I grew up with that kind of value. And then but I never thought I was like smart enough. It's like I had an older brother. My brother was the one that was good in science and math, and I was the one that was good at writing communication. So obviously, my brother was going to be the doctor and I was going to be the lawyer. And so
it's always one of those two in Asian households, right?
Right. Yeah, that was what was predestined for us, right? That was like read in the tea leaves. And so my brother, interestingly, is now an investment banker. So he's also not a doctor. He didn't like organic chemistry and decided it wasn't for him. And I still had that nagging feeling like, something's missing. So, and as in the process of yoga and being learning mindfulness and meditation and looking within and to all like the monsters inside, right? The scary stuff. I was able to kind of reveal to myself, like, I have to pursue this dream or else I'm never gonna forgive myself. So started taking some pre-med classes while I was running my yoga center, and was also very fortunate to be across from Duke Medical Center. So had a lot of doctors and nurses that would come in and take my classes and say, you have a lot of knowledge in physiology and anatomy, and like, have you ever considered a career in medicine? I'm like, yes, I always wanted to be a doctor, but I'm too old now. I'm 27. They're like, what? You're so young, you could totally do it. So I was also very lucky to have a lot of very encouraging mentors that believed in me. So that's so important in your life in general, right? So took the pre-med classes and did quite well. Luckily, I guess I just had learned to be a student by that point. But then applied to med school and got rejected. Applied again and got rejected. And finally, after my third attempt, and it was actually my third and last attempt, because I was like, you know what, maybe the universe doesn't want this for me, and I'm meant to do something with yoga in this community or whatever it might be. But this will be my last attempt. But also, I think I hadn't really applied as broadly as I should have. And so this was me saying, you know, like, I'm going to throw all this spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. And was very fortunate enough to get into med school.
Awesome. I mean, talk about resilience. What was that like for you?
No, yeah, I mean, I say it in such a perfunctory way, but there was a lot of crying.
Yeah.
Sure. There was a lot of like, is this the right path? You know, should I be doing this? Should I just give up? You know, maybe I'm just fooling myself. And always coming back to the meditation cushion and asking myself the questions and being curious about what my motivations were, because, you know, people were like, well, you consider going to PA school or, you know, ND school or RN school. There's a lot of other options. And I'm like, nope, there's something about the practice of medicine and the relationship with the patient that I know that is had with the physician-patient relationship that I really want. And I think that I could really thrive in for both myself and for those I want to help. And so, you know, luckily it worked out. But there was a lot of angst in the process, and even in being a non-traditional student, because I was 30 when I entered medical school as a first year, and you know, my colleagues were 22 and seemed to have a much easier time getting through biochemistry than I did, because I had spent the last 15 years of my life writing as a way of being evaluated, right? And so suddenly needing to like bubble in scantrons was completely foreign to me. But yeah, you have to learn and you have to adapt, and it was a struggle, but I got through it, and now I couldn't be happier.
Yeah, and to kind of talk about you being a non-traditional student, I think in some ways having that experience helps you a lot. Just you know, not necessarily the basic science is part of it, but certainly the clinical science is part of it. And do you feel like your yoga experience helped you in terms of dealing with having to apply 3 times and just your experience as a non-traditional student?
Oh, absolutely. I think a lot of it had to do with giving me a sense of purpose and self-worth as well. So, you know, I've published my first book during my first year of med school, and been working on it prior, obviously. But that in of itself, when I, you know, when you're a first year, you're at the bottom of the totem pole, right? You're first year med student. You don't even have anywhere to put your bag or your jacket. You're just like, you have to like shove it in the corner, and you put yourself in the corner, pretend like you're just melting into the wall and you don't want to bother anyone, right? So it did, if nothing else, give me a sense of, you know, like when the whole world has beat you up, you at least have something to fall back to. And for me, it was not just yoga, but it was also the mindfulness practice, which was very meaningful to me too.
And so throughout your journey, we all know that medical school is so tough. Residency is even tougher. What was your yoga practice like during that time?
Yeah, I had to keep it up. It was the rock that was my foundation, and also teaching was a really big part of that too. Because I think, you know, we teach because we love what it is, the thing that it is, but we also teach because we need to keep learning those lessons. So, you know, the themes that I would bring up in yoga, my classes and my workshops would be really what I was going through in that moment, and saying it out loud and having others witness it keeps you accountable. And so the teaching part of it, and I was even teaching my fellow first year med students, and interestingly, I got a message from one of them the other day saying, you know, I just wanted to tell you how much it meant to me that you taught us, that you spent your time to teach us yoga during our first year. Like having that class every week helped me a lot through first year, but also the mindfulness practices that you taught us has gotten me through med school and residency training. And now as an attending, I pass that on to my students and my colleagues and patients. And so to know that just that time during med school had made such a big impact on her, and she was able to take that foundation and share it with so many others, is, I mean, that's what you live for as a yoga teacher, right?
For sure. And I think, you talk about mindfulness, and we kind of talked about it a little bit earlier. Back then, it just mindfulness and yoga and all that was not readily available, was not prevalent. And now, more and more, just in recent times, there's so much talk about mindfulness. Like 5 or 10 years ago, nobody really even knew what it was. So I think it's really incredible that you were able to bring that at a time when it really wasn't as common as it is now.
Right. And into a population who, I mean, med students are their harshest critics, and to a degree, like, you're expected to actually be perfect, and that's hard, because it's not possible. One, but you want to be that for your patients, and so there's a balance between accepting who you are and the the perfection in the imperfection, right?
Mhm.
But also knowing that being perfect is what your patients deserve, because you want to be sure that you provide the best care and you see everything, you notice everything. But it's a balance that I think needs to be struck, especially in medical training when you're struggling so hard to just get through each day.
Exactly. And that's what we say in yoga too, right? It's practice and not perfection. So it's not really about being perfect. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I know for myself, yoga has changed my life. It came to me when I was in a really rough time during my personal life. And for many people who don't really understand yoga or mindfulness, it's easier for them to kind of dismiss it like, oh, it's just so boring. And they think it's all just about the asanas or the poses, but it's so much more than that. And I think that what you've done over all these years is to bring the awareness of yoga not being just the practice. And I think it's wonderful.
Thank you. I hope so. I think, it's easy to kind of to get um, really wrapped into this. Oh, look at this beautiful pose on this mountaintop where I'm teetering on this little peak and may or may not fall to my death, right? Like, we've heard of this happening on Instagram, right?
Yeah.
But like, um, it's not just about the perfection of the poses, right? It's about the relationship you have to the posture, and the breath, and the feeling that comes up in the ego when you want to look perfect and do it perfectly. And so, it's my philosophy, and I never had mirrors in the yoga center that I opened up, because it really, the mirror is meant to be turned upon yourself, right? Not in the literal sense of the physical body, but in the emotional and spiritual sense of, like, what's my actual reaction here, and am I reflecting and responding to this person because, of my own BS, or is it something that mirror be turned around rather than reacting? Can I
Mhm.
actually respond and take care of that voice inside?
Mhm. Yeah, and that's what we say a lot during yoga. It's not about what everybody else is doing. And my favorite thing, or one of my favorite things at the very end in Shavasana, when you're laying there, the emotional release that I feel. And it's hard to really explain to people who haven't really experienced that, but it just feels so amazing at the end of a class.
Yeah. No, I still remember when through medical school, is just, I remember studying for step one, and it was obviously like the worst experience of anyone every med student's life, right? And I remember talking to a friend after the test and saying, like, I realized I haven't taken a deep breath for 2 months, because I'm all here in my sympathetic nervous system, and I just haven't actually breathed or taken a breath, really. So, that was very revealing to me, because, again, maybe I wouldn't have even noticed that if I didn't have the pranayama practice in yoga. But the fact that you can really start to access the breath when you're in a stressful place, that's where all the change can happen.
Right. And it's so funny when you said that, I found myself taking a big deep breath just as you were talking about it. So breath work is so important, and it definitely helps with any stress or anxiety. So definitely love it. And so I want to kind of shift gears. I know you've done so much, and we'd probably talk for hours with all the things that you've done over the years in terms of your workshops and your books and everything. But I definitely want to hear more about adaptive yoga. So and I myself don't know much about it. I know you wrote a book about it. So tell us a little bit about what exactly that is.
Absolutely, yeah. So, I think adaptive yoga is just yoga, to be totally honest with you, because we adapt it all the time, right? Like, right now, I have an ankle injury, and I'm still practicing yoga, but I'm adapting it to my ankle injury. But and that's, I think, naturally and intrinsically, by the nature of yoga, it's adaptable. but we don't think about it that way. And so I did want to write this book in which we were really clearly instructed how to offer yoga to people with traditional disabilities. So the disabilities include low back pain, osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, lower extremity amputation, spinal cord injury like paraplegia, tetraplegia, stroke, so hemiparesis, and sometimes hemiplegia, and a cerebral palsy, multiple sclerosis, and Parkinson's. So it's 9 what we consider pretty traditional disabilities. And I think the challenge is that even, us as dedicated yoga practitioners often will look at yoga ads and be like, well, I can't do that, so I'm obviously not a yogi. But that's what yoga, it's so interesting because yoga, that's not what yoga is about, right? It's not being like this like super flexible, like Cirque du Soleil gymnast. It's really about the relationship you have with the practice. And a yoga session can be just breath work, or can be just Shavasana, or can be just laughing yoga, or restorative yoga, right? So there's so many varieties and styles that it can be adapted in with just the style, but it can also be adapted with the actual modifications within each posture. And it can also be adapted with the use of props and support, and can also be adapted based on the way it's instructed and the manner in which the teacher or the instructor might be helping to adjust the actual practitioner. So there's such a wide spectrum of adaptability in yoga, but we haven't made it in a very literal and obvious sense, clearly adaptable to those that have traditional disabilities. So I wanted to make it, even though it's the kind of thing where like after it's out, it's like so obvious, but not until we make it really literal do people understand it. And for me, I started out teaching yoga from books. Like there were no videos really out there. There were no videos on YouTube, right? Was YouTube even a thing then? I don't think it was. So I learned yoga from my teachers, yes, but also largely through books. And especially because when I started teaching, I wasn't even a certified teacher yet, right? So I really just wanted to give back to the process of books that had given me so much in the process of my yoga journey. So adaptive yoga really is about offering yoga to people that so deserve and so need yoga, who don't think that it's for them, and it really, really is for them.
So how did you come up with those 9 disability or 9 diseases?
Yeah. So prior to my internal medicine residency, I did 1 year in inpatient rehab, and as a resident physician. And so it in part came from that experience, but it also came from my experience as a yoga teacher. So people with Parkinson's, like there are very specific things in which you can actually help with therapy. So like you want to make really big movements, right? And so that's super applicable to yoga, because then you can do like goddess pose and warrior 2 and triangle. And there's a lot of really big poses that are really appropriate for Parkinson's. So I try to think about how does yoga fit into disabilities, and how does disability fit into yoga? So really I co-authored this with a doctor of physical therapy, one that I met during my year in inpatient rehab. And he and I had started a yoga program at the inpatient rehab hospital. So it was very sort of a very easy transition to start writing this book with him. And so we took a very rehab approach of sort of a physical point of view, like how is this going to help with a person with multiple sclerosis? How is it going to help their function? Or a person with amputation or something. And then how can yoga really help in order to improve their rehab and be incorporated into their rehab plan? So it really was like, what makes sense logically, and how and which conditions can yoga help the most with? So for instance, traumatic brain injury is one of the very traditional rehab modalities, but it would have been too hard to write. It's not included in the book because it would have been too hard to write about TBI, because there's such a broad spectrum of the way it presents, and often TBI patients have a hard time following instructions. So it really was what fits with yoga and what fits with the disabilities.
So is this something that it's for yoga practitioners or yoga people who are teaching yoga, or can people who actually have these disabilities utilize this themselves?
Right, that's a really good question. So the target audience is yoga teachers who want to teach people with these conditions, the actual individuals with the condition, and physical therapists that want to incorporate yoga into their therapy plans for any of these people with conditions.
Are there any types of video tutorials, or what's next for adaptive yoga?
Yeah, that's a great question. You're motivating me. Yeah, I do plan to at some point put together some videos that go along with the book. It's just going to take some time. For now, I do have a couple of workshops planned. The first would be a day-long live stream workshop on January 16th. You can just sign up through my website, and that's going to cover all 9 condition states. It's a 9-hour workshop, so 1 hour per condition state. And it'll be for medical professionals and yoga teachers who want to learn how to teach these students how to practice from an adaptive yoga standpoint.
That's really great to have the option. And is it, do you have to sign up for all 9, or can you pick and choose which ones?
Right. So it's just a 1-day workshop. So you have to sign up for the workshop, which includes all 9. And they all kind of link together, right? So people don't, for instance, the first chapter of the book is low back pain. And people don't often think of low back pain as a disability because everyone's got low back pain, right?
I'm a chronic pain management doctor, so it definitely is a disability.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But the reason why we chose low back pain to start is because it sets a foundation for the rest of the book. Mm-hmm. So it is helpful to participate in all of the condition states because you'll see that there are linkages, and you'll learn, about movement disorders in Parkinson's, that you can apply some of that to multiple sclerosis, or there'll be some things in amputations that you will be able to apply to spinal cord injury. So a lot of it is linked.
Awesome. Are there any other workshops coming up for you that you want to share?
Sorry, say that again.
Are there any other workshops or anything coming up for you other than adaptive yoga that you would like to share?
Yeah, so yes, that's very exciting. This is actually the first time I'm announcing this, but I will be also teaching a 200-hour teacher training coming this summer. It's going to be 8 weekends long, and it's going to start in June, and the plan is to end in August. Obviously, we have to take like July 4th off, but I'm teaching it also with a doctor of physical therapy. She's also a yoga therapist. So we're both yoga therapists and yoga teacher trainers and medical professionals. And in particular, we really wanted to gear it towards, everyone, but people that really want to take a well-researched approach to yoga. So rather, there's a place for all kinds of yoga, but we really want to help to train yoga teachers that are really well informed in the healing properties of yoga. So it's going to be a vinyasa-based practice because that's what we practice and that's how we were trained. And it makes most logical sense to link breath with movement from my point of view. And so you're going to learn how to teach like the hardcore yoga vinyasa practice, but it will really be coming from why do we do this, right? Why do we spread our shoulder blades out when we extend in Warrior Two? Why do we, engage the core and open the heart when we're in chair pose? So it's not so much just do chair pose. It's why are we practicing it, and how does this help, and what are the mechanics behind it, and what are the healing properties behind it? So we really hope to deliver the standard of 200-hour teacher training that we'd be proud of for any of our teachers to become our teachers as well.
That sounds so amazing. And I will say, completing my 200-hour yoga teacher training was life-changing. It was an immersive experience, but just incredible. And I will never forget that experience. So it's super exciting that you're offering this, especially in the way that you are talking about it. I think it's wonderful just to have that foundation of why we do what we do. So oh my gosh, I love yoga, and I could probably talk to you for hours and hours, but we are running out of time, and I want to be sure that you have the opportunity to share with everybody how they can reach you, how they can find you, how they can sign up for all your workshops and all the incredible things that you're doing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, so just find me on ingridyang.com, INGRIDYANG.com. I'm also, as you mentioned, I try to be pretty active on Instagram. It's always hard when you're working as much as we do. But I usually offer a lot of tips and videos and philosophy and words of inspiration, hopefully on the Instagram. And I'm also teaching a retreat coming up in Portugal in September, because
Oh
I
my
feel at that
gosh.
point we'll all have a vaccine and we'll be ready to travel, and it'll be very exciting.
I'll
So
have
yeah,
to,
join me.
that's like on my list of places that I've always wanted to go. I've never been. So it sounds
And this is
incredible.
like the most stunning retreat center I've ever seen in my life. I was like, I can't, I need to do this. You know, like I'm probably not going to make any money on it because it's so expensive to rent it. But it's worth it to me to just go and share it and experience it with other people.
Awesome. Sounds amazing. I'll definitely have to kind of keep an eye out for that in a couple of months. And the last thing, is there any advice you can offer to people who are maybe hesitant about yoga or want to, just want to dip their toes in? What advice can you offer to them?
I'd say find a teacher that resonates with you. So I think a lot of people are like, well, you know, my doctor suggested I do yoga, or my wife really wants me to do yoga or something, and they'll kind of force themselves to go, but you know, it'll be like, I really don't like hot yoga, or you know, this yoga class was a little too slow for me. Then try a different teacher, try a different style, because there's no question that there is a style of yoga for you, and there's a teacher for you. You just have to find the one that actually resonates with you. So try not to force a square peg into a round hole, right? Like really find the one that speaks to your heart, because it will, just like with you and me, it'll be life changing.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Ingrid, for taking your time out to record with me today.
Thank
I'm looking
you.
forward to continuing to follow you and hopefully meet you in person one day soon.
Yes, hopefully at a retreat. Who knows?
All right.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Michelle. Bye.